Folks, I want to tell you, it is a lonely world out there. Loneliness is an epidemic, and it relates to the case we're going to talk about today. It's entrapment. We are talking about DeMare v. State, and here's what happened to DeMare. Pretty simple concept. DeMare is a young adult looking to meet a female, and he goes on Meet Me, the adult section of Meet Me, and he finds an 18-year-old girl named Amber. And Amber chats him up, and they are flirting into the night, man. I mean, after midnight, they're texting for 40 minutes at a time. They're doing this for days on end. 4 days of flirtation and all the things. They eventually start exchanging pics. Nothing naked, just exchanging pics. Eventually, Amber and DeMare decide that they're going to get together after night text and days of doing this sort of thing. They're like, sure, let's get together. Amber then has a confession on day 5 before they get together. The confession is she's not 18. She's not an adult. She is 14 years old. Now, DeMare does what he should have done, and he said, I'm ending this relationship. We are done. But Amber does not give up, because the case says here, DeMare immediately tried to end their relationship, but Amber suggested they could still be friends. DeMare agreed, but DeMare emphasized the couple could not have sex. This was illegal. Amber told him she liked older men and repeatedly tried to convince DeMare this is possible. We could still have sex. And DeMare remained reluctant, eventually caved to some of her sexual innuendo, but only in relation to like, well, what would you do to me if I were 18 years old? And then, they go down that path. But Amber sent another photo, and then DeMare's like, you're 14 years old. You are not going to send me nudes. Do not send me anything like that. So Amber asked for some shots, and like ab shots, and I guess he sent his abs. But that was it. Now, here's what happened. You know what happened. Amber finally says, oh, my parents are going out of town and I have the house to myself. Come on, dude. At least come on over. Let's be friends, blah, blah, blah. DeMare pulls up into the driveway. It is like something out of NBC's To Catch a Predator. They swoop down on him like he is a terrorist, and they arrest him for traveling to meet a minor and several other felonies. DeMare files a motion to dismiss based on entrapment. Like, look, this is just pure and simple entrapment. The judge does not buy it at all. Now, I want to go over with you what the process is for DeMare to get to entrapment, right? Because you start out, first things first. We call this subjective entrapment, by the way. There's another entrapment called objective entrapment. That is when you have just outrageous police conduct that violates the due process clause of the Constitution. We don't have outrageous police conduct here. This is not an objective entrapment case. This is a subjective entrapment case. Fancy word for saying, like, DeMare would have never done this but for the fact that law enforcement was persuading him to do it. Here's the steps that DeMare has to go through, that we attorneys have to go through, if we're going to say, Judge, dismiss this thing, my client was entrapped. First things first, was my client induced to do this traveling to meet a minor felony? And the court said that DeMare established that, in fact, he was induced to commit this crime because, he called it off with Amber and Amber kept going. So he was induced to commit this crime. Now, the next thing in an entrapment case is predisposition. Did DeMare have a predisposition to commit this crime? Now, DeMare has to come out into the court and say, I have evidence or lack of evidence that I was predisposed to do this with Amber. He has no prior record involving minors. He has no prior investigations meeting into minors. He didn't have crap on his phone when he was arrested that would suggest he was searching for minors. He found Amber in the adult section of an adult site when Amber claimed to be an adult. So none of that predisposition stuff applies. But this is an interesting thing on entrapment cases. Now, once DeMare established those two things, the gears shift and the state must prove beyond every reasonable doubt that this man was not persuaded to do this crime. And I'll read to you what the court says. The state had the burden to establish beyond every reasonable doubt that DeMare was awaiting any opportunity to do this crime, that he was ready and willing without persuasion. Two key words. He was ready and willing without persuasion to commit this offense. The court looks at that and says, state, you have not met your burden. This man was not ready to commit this offense without persuasion. Look at how much persuasion this man went through to get this meeting going. Literally, at some point, Amber is a detective, not even a female, like some middle-aged white detective just playing 14-year-old female. But Amber actually told this guy, well, you're just afraid. You're afraid to meet me. You're afraid to be my friend. She suggested that he was scared. Like everything they did to DeMare, the court says, we are throwing out your conviction. Look what you did. Law enforcement led the conversation. Law enforcement initiated sexual innuendo, so to speak. Law enforcement coerced and cajoled DeMare for details about what they would do sexually. Law enforcement challenged his reluctance to have a relationship with her, saying that he was scared and things of that sort. The court said it was law enforcement's persistent urging that eventually overcame DeMare's reluctance to commit this offense. There you have it, folks. This is entrapment. Plain and simple, DeMare's case was thrown out.